Hello and welcome back to All Things Money. I'm your host, David Blain, and this week is the tax filing deadline, so we're devoting a lot of time today to taxes and where your tax dollars goes. I finished up last segment. If you missed it, head on over to the web, dlblain.com. In a week or so, we'll post an archive copy of the show, but in the end, I was touching on a key point that there's this huge disconnect between the taxpayer and what they're actually getting for their money, because the money is just sort of withdrawn from their pay. They don't really notice it. It's the employer's responsibility to send it in. A lot of employers use a payroll service like I do, so I don't even really see it on a regular basis. I know that, you know, the employer portion pays Social Security and Medicare, and I know there's a big number every month that we send to the IRS for our employees' Social Security, Medicare, unemployment insurance, workman's comp, you know, there's just, list goes on and on. And so as many barriers as there are between the person actually paying it and the service received, you see this disconnect between the value you receive, and we see it in healthcare, and we see it in college, and we certainly see it in taxes, as the recent GSA trip to Vegas illustrates. I mean, if that was that man's own money, the chief of that region, would he really spend $900,000 on that conference if it was his own money, if it was his tax money? Well, no. I mean, I don't think there's any taxpayer in America that, if they had to write the check, would have spent that. But when you have this big disconnect between the person spending the money and the service and the people that paid for it, that's exactly what happens. So what we want to talk about is, where does the money go that you pay into the IRS? And we see this at tax time. People bring their stuff in and they can't keep track of where the money went. They're not sure if they paid their estimate, or they're not sure, you know, how much this was. Can you imagine trying to keep up with $3.6 trillion? Well, that's what the federal government spent roughly last year, $3.6 trillion. And so these numbers are obviously sort of rough. I don't think they have it down to the penny. But we look at the latest estimates from the official budget at the GPO, and you'll see where the money went. The official budget is 250 pages. Once again, if you can handwrite out a budget on the back of an envelope, I think you're doing pretty good. The government budget is 250 pages. So once again, just the sheer complexity of it leads to inefficiency and waste. So let's kind of start with, I thought it would be fun to break this down. If you're, I picked someone that makes $1,000 a week. That's $52,000 a year, which is about the median household income in the U.S. Now, for our purposes, when we say that's tax-free, because we're talking about, you know, the government. So the largest three items are Social Security, health care, and the defense budget. Social Security consumes 20%, health care consumes 22%, and defense spending is 20%. So if we take our fictional $52,000 a year person, he spent $600 of his $1,000 weekly paycheck on those items. So once again, Social Security, health care, and defense, the three largest items, account for 60% of the budget. Federal health care works out to more than $11,000 a year, and so that would be about $125 of his weekly paycheck. So the largest portion of the budget is health care. We've talked about this on the show before. 50% of the health care spending in America goes to less than 5% of the people. And so we talk about fairness and tax code and all this other stuff, but yet it never really comes up in health care that fully 11% of this, and now that's across America, 50%. I would stipulate that because the federal government's health care is mostly senior health care, you know, Medicare, that a larger percentage of the federal government healthcare budget goes to an extremely small number of people. And I'm not saying we should leave the people by the side of the road and let them die. That's not what we're saying at all. But what I am saying is this needs to be looked at, it needs to be addressed, and quit just throwing more money at the problem. That there is a big problem. Of course, defense spending comes in equal with Social Security, 20%. You know, being an ex-military person, I think that defense spending is very important to the country. Is there fraud, waste, and abuse? Sure, that needs to be rooted out. We have the smallest Navy. I was an Army guy, but still, we have the smallest. Currently, have one of the smallest navies since the interwar period between World War I and World War II. I don't know that that is such a good thing, but that is one of the things that constitutionally we should be spending money on, is provide for the common defense. That's a stated purpose of the federal government, not to pay for people's health care. Okay, so back to what, if you look at our fictional $1,000 a week salary, you paid $200 a week to keep the country safe. Now, one thing that we see here, interest on the debt runs at about 6% of the federal budget. So borrowing money, you know, we don't take in $3.6 trillion, so we had to go borrow it. And so 6% of our federal budget is consumed by interest on the debt. Well, we're coming up on our second break. When we come back for our final segment, I'll continue going through the federal budget and talking about where your tax dollar goes. So for All Things Money, I'm your host, David Blain. We'll be right back after a few short messages.